BierTalk. Gespräche über und beim Bier.
Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast BierTalk. Today we have another English episode and we are going to a country bordering Germany in the north. We are going to Denmark. And we meet there a skilled brewer, Lynge Larsen, who started brewing some years ago, but has a long brewing history as a home brewer and also a very interesting name of his brewery. But Jens, it's wonderful that you are here and maybe you introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me. As you said, my name is Lynge Larsen. I am the owner and the brewer of a very small brewery here in Denmark called Spybrew. It's a brewery that has been, I've been having it commercially since 2014. And before that, I did almost 10 years as a home brewer, dedicated home brewer. So actually, I brewed my first beer back in 2003. And then 2014, I started the brewery. Everything that's successful nowadays either started in a basement or in a garage. And of course, I started in my basement in my house. So for the first, I think 4 or 5 years, I had the brewery at my basement. And now I've just moved the brewery outside and into some real nice facilities, still situated in Hvidovre, the town where I live. And it's very close to our capital. It's very close to Copenhagen. So it's been quite a journey so far.
Oh yes, and we met close to Copenhagen about 4 weeks ago, I think. And we were there judging at a competition for the Danske Ølenthusiaster, which is another interesting story. But maybe we talk about your personal beer history before. So how did you come into beer?
Well, actually, I'll try and make the story short, but the way that I got interested in brewing as a home brewer was actually my ex-mother-in-law of all persons. She gave me a Christmas present. That was a DVD back in the old days where you can actually see something on DVDs. You didn't stream stuff, and there was this video about 2 guys brewing a beer. And I just fell in love with the idea of brewing a beer together with my neighbor. And then I started buying all the ingredients. And I think the first beer we did was actually horrible. But I was kind of hooked with the idea of brewing, putting together the water, the malt, the hops, and the yeast. And within actually quite, not that long time, but we started out with some horrible beers. But then short after we actually not nailed it, but we produced some quite drinkable beers. And then I really started the geeky point about finding out, everything about pH levels and temperatures and, all the geeky parts. Starting diving into all sorts of readings about how to make the beer even better. And then I started brewing for myself, not together with my neighbor, because that was more like we were interested at that time to get it as high as alcohol volume as possible. But I wanted to dive into the more or less forgotten beer styles, the British mild and some of those beers that were perhaps not that popular. And I found out that with the small brewing setup that I actually have, if you go to a beer bar in Copenhagen and they have 20 taps, I think at least 14 will be some kind of variation of an IPA. I also do IPAs, but I find it more interesting to do some of the other and less popular beer styles. So I do Rauch beer. I do and also one of my signature beers is actually my Habanero Pale Ale. It's a pale ale, an American pale ale with real Habanero added to the beer. So that's how I actually started out. I also do the New England IPAs, of course, but I tend to go to the more old school beer styles actually.
And has it been always like this, or did you have or do you have some favorite beer styles which you like most and which you brew most?
Well, I would say it was the West Coast IPAs that got me interested. I'm not that fond of the very sweet taste in the Belgian beers. So for me, I was more or less looking towards England, to the British mild, to the IPAs. The heavily hoppy IPAs where all the hops have actually gone into as bittering hops. So those kind of beers make me kind of interested in what was going on. Because we have Carlsberg in Denmark and everybody brings that pilsner, but I found out that you can do a whole lot more with the ingredients, and that's how I started. Looking towards England and then looking a little bit further towards America. When I found out, with the high alpha acid hops, what you can do with those kind of hops when you add them, and either whirlpool or hop stand, or you use them for dry hopping. So for me, it's the easy drinkable beers, the hoppy beers, also some of the more not too sweet beers. Actually, I like to have my beers, with a high attenuation, so it's not that much residual sugar in the beer.
So, and now let's go from hop to hot. So, to your Habanero beer, which I have here, and also you have a can, I think. And so, yeah, maybe I first open it and then let's talk about it. So now it's in my glass and it's really fantastic, looking fantastic. So a nice brownish amber color, and it's almost clear, and above is a nice white foam. It's a little bit colored, so also a bit brownish. And yes, and I have all this intense smell in my nose, so these chili pepper habanero smell of these fruits, very intense and also maybe a little bit dangerous. So I don't really know if I drink or not, but I think I have to. But at first I tried to describe it a little bit more. So you have some herbal, some fruit, vegetable, also a bit fresh, so like cucumber. Very, very interesting aroma. Also a little bit of guava in my opinion. So great, fantastic. But okay, now I have to take my first sip, so... Oh, yes. Very intense, especially at the beginning. And now also the spiciness is developing, so it's really, it's great. So you get the first sip, it's a bit sweet, and then you have all this pepper aroma, and this is going through all of your mouth. It has some sweetness still, and then the spiciness, the hot aroma, it's overwhelming, I would say, but not too much. So it's still balanced. It's a nice drink. It's still drinkable, and also the finish is long, really long and hot, but also in a nice way. So it's still a drinkable beer. It's still a pale ale, and also you have this habanero add-on. So really a very nice balanced beer, and I just want to have the next sip. Just a moment. Yes, it's really great, and so I didn't expect that, but I think I really can drink the whole can, so no problem. Maybe another one. So really very interesting, very well done. Thank you for this very special beer. But I think it's not easy to brew such a beer. So has it always been like this?
When I brewed it back in 2014, the flames from the habanero was much more intense, because when I was done, when I had done brewed the beer and it was transferred to the fermenter, I wanted to be able to smell the habanero at that point. But I found out if I could smell the habanero when transferring the wort to the fermenter, the level of habanero was way too much. So actually the beer that you're drinking, when I'm transferring that one to the fermenter, you don't have any notes from the habanero at all. It's after the yeast has fermented all the sugar, and actually it's just during the forced carbonation that the expression from the habanero actually evolves and speaks out. So I tried to make a chili beer, not from chili powder, but from real chili, habanero chili, that's actually drinkable, where you can drink an entire can without having flames both ways. And it goes fantastic for shellfish or barbecue, if you want to pair it to food.
Really interesting. And as you say, it's a very special beer, especially for food pairing. And to be honest, the more I drink, the longer I have it in my mouth, more I also have some honey, I have some sweetness, and also bitterness, which is also coming in the end. So it's a nice mixture of this sweetness and bitterness and, of course, spiciness, the hot chili aroma. So fantastic. And to be honest, I only knew it before from darker beers and maybe stronger beers. But so you're setting new standards maybe for such a beer.
Yeah, because here in Denmark, when we have a chili beer, at least years ago, the chili was, as an add-on to some of the more darker beers, so you could have a chili stout. There weren't that many chili beers in a lighter beer. So, but I wanted to kind of make this beer where the beer in itself is, excuse me when I say it about my own beer, but it's a little bit boring. It's an easy drinkable beer without that much, it's not that interesting. But that leaves a lot of space for the habanero to really evolve during the tasting of the beer. And that's why I want to try to make this in, the EBC light beer, like it is a US pale ale that the chili is in. So we also have a guy in Denmark called Chili Claus that does a lot of tasting with chilies, and but he also has a beer or several beers with chili, but that's the chili powder that he's selling. So that's tossed in the fermenter during fermentation. This beer actually, the level of the spiciness varies from batch to batch because I'm using real habaneros. And I chose habaneros because they are, it's a chili that's not, it's not too spicy. You can still feel the fruit from the fruitiness from the pepper in itself. At least that's my tasting palate.
So I think you really have to take care where you get your chilies from. So do you have a special store or a special farmer, or maybe do you grow your own chilies? So what are you doing to get the same quality one and one again?
I have the same place where I buy the chili, the habanero chili, every time. And even though it's the same place that manufactures these or produces these habaneros, it's not the same level each time, because of sun and nutrients in the soil and stuff. So it varies every time. But it's one of my most popular beer, actually. And some of the chili heads, not hot heads, but chili heads, when they come and they found out that I have a new batch, they're really excited to see if it's a little bit stronger, or it's a little bit more, gentle compared to the other ones that they're buying. So it's actually quite fun.
So there is really a chili beer fan base at your brewery. It's really fantastic. Very good to hear. How does it work? Do they come regularly, or do they buy just 24, 48 cans of this beer, or how does that work at your brewery?
Yeah. And I also have it on tap at the brewery at my very small tasting room. So it's a very popular beer, and it's also one of my old go-to beers, to be honest.
Oh yes, I understand. And to be honest, the more I drink it, the more I really understand what you mean. So it's a little bit like here in Bamberg, we have our smoke beer. And when people come and try the smoke beer, they always say, oh no, I cannot drink another one. That's too hard. That's too intense. But when they have a second, a third, or a fourth, or maybe more, then they get used to it. And then they get more and more liking this beer, and they want to have more. And then they are really smoke beer fans. And I think it can be the same with this nice chili beer. So maybe the first is a little bit irritating, but if you have the second and if you get used to it, it's more and more interesting because it has kind of another dimension in the beer which you normally don't have. Very interesting. Yeah,
but it's changed from being more or less like some kind of a gimmick because it was very strong. So whereas it's more like on a level that I would say even not chili head interested people could actually enjoy this beer. So I lowered the amount of habanero, and I'm brewing between 600 and 800 liters per batch. I have, as I said, it's a small brewery, and I use about 700 to 800 grams of habanero, and I let them boil for about 4 to 5 minutes during the last time of the hot boiling. And then I remove the chili again. So it's like, if you want to make a cup of tea and you want to have it really aromatic, you just, more or less just dip the tea leaves in the boiling water. It's the same what I'm trying to do with the beer. And that's why it's actually quite funny because you can't taste it, you can't sense it in any ways when you are sampling the wort before it's being transferred to the fermenter. So it's like, fingers crossed that the chili will actually emerge during the last part of the false carbonation before canning.
I get a strange picture in my mind. So I think when we have our beer and when it's brewed, afterward you have the spent grain. And here you use it maybe for making breads or even for using it for schnitzel or something like that. But is it like a special waste what you have after brewing the habanero beer? Or what do you do with the spent habaneros?
I have this organic company that gathers my spent grains. So I just add the chili to that one. So it's not like it has to be in a special special waste bin. So it's just added together with the hops and the used grains.
Okay, I understand. It's not nuclear waste. It's okay. But how long did it take you to get there? So did you make lots of different beers, or did you have a special way to get to the final version, I would say?
Actually, the beer that you're drinking did have a big brother, and where I used Carolina Reaper, one of the strongest chilies in the world at that time.
Yeah.
But that was used only as a gimmick at the beer festival in Denmark, where I took 900 milliliters, a little bit less than a liter of this extracted water from a fermenting. A lot of the Carolina Reaper had been fermenting, so I took almost a liter of that one and added to a keg. So that was 19 liters of pale ale, my undercover pale ale, and 1 liter of the Carolina Reaper. And I can tell you that we saw a lot of grown-ups crying and people are having hiccups, because it was so strong. So we refused to serve it as a beer, but they could have the free taste. So we were just pouring 2 or 3 centiliters because it was so strong.
Yeah,
it was fun, and I had. But you know how it is at beer festivals. I've had stickers made, with "I survived drinking the flames from hell," and whenever people tasted the beer or the really strong chili beer, they had this sticker put on their on the breast, and you know how it is with beer and a good atmosphere, and all of a sudden, a lot of guys saw the sticker and they wanted to have a sticker too. Yeah, but then you have to taste this beer.
That really sounds like the next level of guerrilla marketing in my ears. So really a crazy way.
Yeah, it was. But I would say that the people that tasted the really strong chili beer, they had to wait at least 20 minutes before the tasting palates were down to a level again where they could taste other beers. So there were some people at the beer festival that weren't that impressed because they said, well, now you're taking my opportunity to taste some other beers. And they were actually quite right. But we did warn them before they actually tasted the beer.
Yeah, of course. It's their choice, I would say. But let's talk about your other beers. So are you normally doing also all the ales, like the IPAs and pale ales and whatever, and also lagers? Is that also on your plan?
I also make lagers now. The first 4 years when I was doing commercial brewing, I stayed away from the lagers because, in my opinion, making a pilsner or a bottom fermented beer, a lager, is one of the most difficult beers to brew, even though it's such an easy drinkable beer. Because if you're not, if you don't master the brewing process, if you don't master the fermentation techniques and everything, you'll be able to taste all the errors that you possibly could make in the beer when you're doing a bottom fermented beer. If you make a stout, if you make a real hoppy IPA, it's not that significant. You can really hide some of the fermentation temperature errors and stuff in those kind of beers. So for me, I wanted to make sure that the beers that I was producing, that I was brewing, was actually okay, that they were fine before I started making the lagers, because it is like if I'm out and I'm going to a brewery that I haven't been to before, and I see that they have lagers or bottom fermented beers, that would be some of the first beers that I wanted to try. Because if a brewery, is able to make a good pilsner, they can make everything, in my opinion. You do know what I mean?
Oh, yes, I know what you mean. So when you get around a lot in the world and you realize how many breweries try to make proper lagers and how many breweries fail in that, yeah, I know. And as you said, I think if a brewery manages to make a really good lager, then they can brew almost everything. But I just have another question back to the chili beer. I just thought about the yeast. Does it have any trouble fermenting this very hot and spicy water, or is it going a normal way?
No, there's no issues at all. Even during the first kind of the Habanero pale ale I did in the beginning, that was much more spicy. There weren't any problems with the yeast or any off flavors from the stress, if you could call it that, with the spiciness in the malt before fermenting. So actually, there are no problems with fermenting in this kind of beer.
Okay, so that calms me down. So if the yeast has no trouble, I won't have any trouble too. But maybe let's talk a little bit about your brewery's name. So it's Spybrew. So really it sounds like a very special name. So we have all these things in mind of Jason Bourne or of James Bond or all these agents and special service and these things. So what is the connection? What were your first thoughts when you started the brewery and when you were looking for a name?
The town that I'm living in is called Hvidovre, so I could actually call it something with the town's name, Hvidovre, but I wanted to make the name of the brewery something that wasn't, geographically focused. So I'm very fond of James Bond movies. That's my go-to movies all the time, and I have so it's not difficult to find some funny names. I have an undercover pale ale, I have a whistleblower wheat beer, I have a conspiracy IPA, I have a moonraker porter, I have Miss Moneypenny mild. So I try to keep the beers in that context. And actually a quite funny story, with the different kind of languages, even in Scandinavia. One of the first beer events that I went to outside of Denmark was in Sweden, in Gothenburg. When I think it was the first year that I was brewing the beers, and Spybrew, it was displayed in two lines. So you have Spy in the top and then Brew at the bottom, like my logo. The only thing is in Sweden, Spy or Spy, that means to throw up. So perhaps that was not that popular to begin with. When the Swedes were coming to see the brewery, they saw this Spybrew, so they thought, will that make me sick? But luckily for me, because they could see the names of the beers, that was actually the British way of pronouncing the brewery's name.
That's really interesting, because we have the same in our local dialect. If you have to warm it, we also say you have to spy. So it's close to your expression. So maybe some of the people may get confused, don't they?
But I would say if you have too much of my beer, you might spy. Yeah. And also when I'm out displaying my beers, I have this black and white theme, so it's and people love it. So I stick to that. I did spend 24 years in the army though as an officer, so I have some kind of relation to classified material, but I'm not able to tell you, then I have to kill you or. Yeah.
Yeah, but isn't there some secret around your beers or something which we could connect to the spy idea in a, let's say, James Bond way?
There are no secrets because I really love this brewing community. Home brewers, when they come and ask for if they can have at least a hint towards the recipe of some of my beers, well, I'm more than willing to share my recipes, because. It's even though you brew the same beer on two different setups, you won't have the same beer. So it's even though it's a Spybrew name, it's my recipes are not secret. I love the idea about that we can share everything in our community.
Yes, I know that from Germany. So here also the beer world is like a big family, and even the big brewers help the smaller ones, and they help them, for example, with the yeast, or also if they need some malt, some special hops or something like that. And also the homebrewers are involved in this. So it's really like a big community and mostly very nice, very friendly people. And so that's also another reason why I like to be in the beer world and part of it.
It's very outspoken here in Denmark that we help each other. Both the bigger breweries and the smaller breweries, and the prices on cans are rocketing at the moment because everybody's wants to have the beers canned instead of bottled. And some of the little bit larger breweries compared to my brewing setup, well, I'm able to buy pallets of cans directly from them because when they're buying big orders, several trucks delivering pallets of cans. Compared to if I have to buy them, they'll be more expensive for me because I can only buy 1 or perhaps 2 Euro pallets with cans. So in that kind of sense, even though in any other business you could say we are competitors, but we are more like colleagues, and I really love that, and I try to keep that in mind whenever I can help someone in the brewing community.
If you talk about the Danish beer scene, especially around your town, so how many brewers are there, and how good is your connection, and did you maybe also did collaboration brews or something like that?
In our town alone, we are 4 breweries, and if you take the entire, all of Denmark, at the moment, I think we are a little bit above 270 breweries, and if you rewind back to the mid-1980s, I think we were like 17 breweries, or there were, I wasn't brewing at that time, but there were like 17 breweries back at that time. So from the mid-80s to this day, it's gone from 17 to more than 270 breweries. So it's quite a few breweries. But I think it's becoming like it's been in Germany for many years. If you go to some part of Denmark, you have a little bit bigger breweries, and you have a lot of small breweries that are more or less connected in some way, and so it makes it interesting beer-wise to travel around Denmark now because there are a lot of different kind of beers that you can taste, and it's not just Carlsberg all the time. And that's what I love when I'm in Germany. There are so many different kind of pilsners or lagers that you can taste, and that's fantastic.
Yes, you're right. I really like our beer scene, and I like the idea of going into a beer garden and have a nice beer. But also I think we heard about your history and all the stories behind them. What about your family and your friends? What do they think, or maybe what did they think in the beginning when you started brewing? Maybe it's not so easy if you start using the kitchen and the whole house and all is full of brewing equipment and beer. And so, what were their reactions?
I would say that, besides that, I actually love my wife. She's been very understanding and very tolerant, and really encouraging me to take the step from moving the brewery from the basement and supporting me all the way. And I would say at the beginning she was more sure that this was actually going to be a success than I was. So I owe her everything. And you know how it is with friends. They might not turn up when you have to do all the shitty stuff about canning and brewing and cleaning, but when the beer is either canned or bottled, all of a sudden you have all the friends in the world, So, and then it started out, like I said, it started back in 2003, and that was when I was brewing together with my neighbors. And some of them are still brewing as home brewers on small scale, but I still enjoy bringing back some beers from the brewery and presenting them to the neighbors, and because that's, like we said, a lot of things have changed, tasting-wise to the beers compared to when we were brewing it back in the kitchen. and that's a positive way, yeah. So,
of course, now they are all happy with what you're doing. And do you live totally on brewing, or do you still have your job?
Yes, I quit my job in the army several years ago. So now I'm only, I'm just focusing on brewing and trying to see where Spybrew might end. And one of my key things about Spybrew is I don't have any investors. So it's perhaps the involvement of, the add-ons with stainless steel might not be in the pace that I would like it to be. It's a little bit slower, but since we don't have any investors, there are no people that only focus on the spreadsheets. I still focus, and I still have, every 100% control, so I can focus on getting the right ingredients for my beers. So, and I want people to know that when they're drinking a beer from Spybrew, that it's made by me on my setup. So I don't take a recipe and send it out into the town to a bigger brewery and have it made on their setup. So every beer is brewed by me. I like to keep, a heart in what I'm doing, and hopefully that would benefit me in some time. I can see that people are really interested, and we don't have a beer garden like you guys have in Germany, but I have a small place with the setup, and it's frequently visited by people dropping by, and I still have new people, new visitors that I haven't met before because they were, said, well, you have to come and see Spybrew. It's just such a small brewery, but it's a fantastic brewery, and I just love the idea of being there all the time.
Maybe some last advice for our listeners. So, will you go to some festivals where they can meet you and have your beers, or do you even have a web shop?
I am looking into getting a web shop up and running, but right now I'm just focusing on keeping up with the demands here in Denmark. In the next month, at the beginning, the second weekend of May, I'm attending the Mikkel Beer Celebration in Copenhagen, the NBCC, so I'll be bringing 8 beers for those sessions. And the weekend afterwards, we have a little bit bigger, more down to earth, the Øl Festival by the Danish beer enthusiasts. So I will also be having a booth there, serving my beers. And then in June, mid of June, there'll be a beer get together with 20 breweries at Roskilde. It's like a get together where people can come and taste our beers too. So we have actually scheduled quite a few beer events, and besides that, I try to keep at least during the summer we have 3 or 4 events at the brewery with the live music and our sausage wagon and beers and So there's a lot of good things planned now that the COVID is not that present anymore.
Yes, we are all happy that has gone, hopefully. And of course, we will put links to our show notes so that people can find your brewery and your Facebook page and your future web shop. And yes, so from my side, thanks a lot. It was great to have you here, a great talk and a great beer. And to be honest, it's empty, so I made the whole can. And I only can recommend that to our listeners. So get this great Habanero Pale Ale and get into a really new way of beer from this fascinating Danish brewery. Thanks.
Yes, yeah, fine.
BierTalk, der Podcast rund ums Bier. Alle Folgen unter www.biertalk.de.